So thank you, everyone, for joining and welcome. My name is Laura. I'm the regional manager at GoVocal, and I will be the host of today's webinar. Today's webinar is all about neighbourhood engagement, neighbourhood projects. The government recently allocated funding to almost 100 local authorities in the context of the Pride in Place campaign. And it's a great opportunity for us to shed some light on how you can leverage community engagement to run better neighbourhood initiatives. We wouldn't be able, of course, to run this webinar without our wonderful partners. So today I'm joined by 3 different organisations, 2 local authorities that we work with, the London Borough of Southwark and Falkirk Council in Scotland, as well as by our partner, the New Citizen Project. So maybe we can start actually with a quick round of introductions and make this slightly more interactive. Andy, I can see you first, so why don't you go ahead and give a quick introduction to yourself and New Citizen Project, and then everyone can take turns.
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Laura. And yeah, great to be here. Thanks everyone for joining. I'm Andy from the New Citizen Project. We're a strategy and innovation company. We work with organizations of all kinds. I'm going to say a little bit more about us in a moment, but I'm going to be sort of opening today and sharing a few provocations for how local government can think about Pride in Place as part of a kind of wider cultural shift within local councils towards working more closely with citizens and communities. Great to be here. Thanks.
Thank you, Andy. Stephanie, Margaret, do you want to go next?
I'll go next. Good morning, everybody. My name is Margaret. I'm from Falkirk Council. I work in the communities team, and we are happy to come along and speak to you all this morning about our experiences of community engagement. And thanks to Laura for the invite. Previously, when I engaged with Laura, she must have been driven mad by me because of my inactivity in getting a contract over. So I think I owe her one now.
We did get to know each other quite well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Margaret. Stephanie, as you work with Margaret, do you want to go next? And then we can hand over to Jonathan and Chantal from Southwark.
Yeah, I'm Steph, and as Margaret says, I work alongside Margaret in the community partnership team in Falkirk Council, and our role is just to kind of work with our teams and how we engage with our communities. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about our Community Choices programme. So we'll get on to that soon.
Lovely, thank you.
Hi, I'm Jonathan from Southwark Council. So I'm in the community engagement team here, and we do tons of community engagement. But actually, I'm here under false pretenses today because we're here presenting an absolutely wonderful project that's actually been largely led and delivered by Chantel and her colleagues at Clearview, and we've just been collaborating with her. But Chantel's done most of the work. Chantel?
Hey, yeah, hi everyone. So we've worked very closely with Southwark Council and with Ladbroke Council. Jonathan has literally been my go-to for everything when it comes to Go Vocal. So I work at Clearview Research, and we do marketing social and market and social research, particularly with underrepresented communities. We do engagement, we do strategy, but right now our baby, I guess, is a Think Fund, which we've been working on with Jonathan over the last year now, really. But the project was I ideated 2 years ago, and we'll get into it as the session goes on. But yeah, lovely to be here. Thanks for having us.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really excited to hear what you all have to share in a minute. So in terms of the agenda and what our audience can expect, we'll have Andy introduce a little bit the sort of Pride in Place initiative and mostly kind of help us think about what role engagement and potentially digital engagement can have within that campaign. And then we love our webinars to be a place where you hear practical examples and can get some inspiration for your own work, which is where our partners at Southwark and Falkirk will come in and present the projects and neighbourhood projects that they have been running. There will be plenty of time for Q&A at the end of the session, so after all the presentations, which brings me to just a couple of housekeeping rules. First of all, feel free to use the chat if there's anything you want to share, introduce yourselves, but also ask questions. There is also a Q&A functionality at the bottom of your screen, which you should have access to. Even easier and better if you can drop any questions you might have in there. Finally, we will definitely be we are recording this session, and we will be sharing a recording with all of those who registered. So if you need to leave a little bit earlier, do not worry, you will get all of that. That's pretty much it for me. So let's get started. Andy, over to you to walk us through the Pride in Place initiative. I'll let you share your screen and just take over from me.
Great, thanks, Laura. Yeah, so as Laura said, I'm going to introduce a little bit about first kind of New Citizen Project and our sort of the work we do and some of the sort of theories and frameworks we work with, and then I'll be talking a little bit about how we think that might apply to the Pride in Place program as well. So as I said, we're a strategy and innovation company. We have a belief that when given the opportunity, people can and want to shape the communities that they're part of for the better. And as I say, over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to talk a little bit about how that belief shapes what we do at New Citizen Project and some thoughts on what that might mean for councils, particularly those who are in receipt of that Pride in Place funding. So first, a little bit about New Citizen Project. We see the world through the lens of stories, and we believe that at any one time there is a dominant story dictating the way that we as individuals and as organizations operate in the world. These stories frame everything, the decisions we make, the opportunities we create, and what we think is ultimately possible. And we understand the time we're living in as a battle between different stories. So the first of those is the subject story. This is one that was dominant back when local government was set up in the UK. This is a story that is very present in councils in many ways. And this story is paternalistic. It says that the right thing to do is keep your head down, do as you're told, while the God-given few lead society forward. And in the subject story, that word authority is very relevant. Local government is ultimately a protector, and pride would really come through the opening of something like a grand, new town hall. By the turn of the millennium, the subject story had largely been replaced by a new one, what we call the consumer story. This story is defined by efficiency, competition, standards. It's transactional. It says if I pay my council tax, then I expect this product in return or this service. A key word in the consumer story is customer. Local government is ultimately a service provider, and the individual's role is limited to transactions, to transact and demand from the council. The logic of the consumer story says that if we deliver for our customers, then that will lead to satisfaction, potentially pride. However, what we see time and again through all the organizations we work with, not just in local government, but the way that we sort of see the challenges we face as a society as a whole, is that consumer story is hitting its limits. When it comes to our biggest challenges, whether that's loneliness, climate change, indeed a lack of pride, these can't be solved from within a story and a logic that says that we're independent from each other. We're demanding, ultimately selfish individuals. So in thinking about these challenges, we need to create a new story. And that's what we call the story of the citizen. This story recognizes that we are interdependent. Our role is to participate and create alongside organizations who are there to facilitate and do stuff with us. So in local places, that story shows up in all kinds of ways, and I'm sure you'll recognise this story in initiatives you're part of. We'll be hearing from initiatives today from colleagues at councils who are really practicing these ideas. But we see that in the ways that we help out our neighbours, in the ways that we meet, whether that's in public libraries or on a football pitch, and in the ways that we come together to make stuff better through formal channels like citizens' assemblies, or simply through organising a street party in a WhatsApp group. And organizations, in this case councils, have a huge role to play in shaping these stories, in opening up or closing down opportunities for people to be citizens. And that's where we aim to help. We work with organizations to help them create the conditions for people to step into that citizen role, working to design the strategies, the cultures, and deliver the projects that build collective agency and open up new ways of solving these shared challenges. So I'm going to share a little bit now on what that might mean for councils who are navigating the Pride in Place programme. And I'm not going to do a deep dive on the policy itself here. Many of you will be much more aware of the policy than me. Maybe you've submitted your plans already and have been sort of deep in the detail of that. But for any of you who are coming to this fresh, we're talking about the government's programme of up to £5 billion worth of funding for up to 250 places over the next 10 years through a number of different programmes of funding. And the aim of that is to build stronger communities, create thriving places, and empower communities to make decisions about their local areas. Crucially, and a key reason we're really excited about this programme, is that the policy acknowledges that pride isn't about about creating agency and belonging, not just providing communities with some kind of shiny new thing they didn't necessarily ask for, but involving people in the process of renewal and investing in the stuff that matters. However, whilst that ambition is to empower local communities, the policy itself doesn't dictate the extent to which local people need to be involved in decision making or part of the solutions themselves. That's up to the councils and the neighbourhood boards to decide. And that's why the key to the programme's success is going to be in how this programme is delivered across local places and the extent to which local councils and neighbourhood boards truly involve communities along the way. To help with that, I wanted to offer a framework that we've been working with for a few years now with local government teams who are looking to make that shift towards more meaningful, trusting relationships between council and citizen and towards more participatory cultures inside and out. So I wanted to offer this as a way of thinking about how you might involve people in decision making, also in the rollout of new projects and initiatives that might spring from this funding, and how you might use this newfound energy and excitement to spread a more participatory culture right across your work as a council. We call this framework Culture Shift. It's a simple 3-part framework, as you can see, which covers 3 things we think need to be in place to make this kind of participatory culture change stick: narrative, rituals, and totems. So I'm going to take you through each of these in turn and share a few thoughts on what we think might be relevant to the Pride in Place programme. So first is narrative. This is the story, a new story about a citizen future. That's the prevailing view around the council and the relationship it has with citizens, and crucially, the shift that you want to make happen. When it comes to Pride in Place, many of the sort of spoken parts of narrative are probably already exist, whether it's in your own council strategic documents or in your regeneration plans. But in thinking about how you're going to deliver that plan, it's worth paying attention to some of those more unspoken parts of narrative too, in how colleagues and citizens themselves feel and talk about the council and their own communities as well. So the provocation here isn't that pride isn't just something that you are moving towards. It's also something you need to recognize you're maybe moving away from, or there is something you're moving away from. So the question is, if pride is the end point, what is the starting point? And that shift needs to be recognized in what you're doing. So one way of thinking about narratives, let's click back, is thinking about the shifts you want to make and what citizens want to see happen. So of course that's best to do with communities and digital engagement and other tools can be a really good way of doing that. But a simple way you can start is within your team or with your neighborhood board, asking where is it we are now and where is it we want to get to? If pride is that endpoint, what is the starting point we're working from? And this is, we've got some example there of an example of a council we worked with, from short-term and shiny to long-term real change. At the higher level, it's that simple shift from being a service provider to an enabler. But what does that mean for you in the context of Pride in Place? Maybe something to consider as we go through today. The next part of the framework is totems. These are the big symbolic initiatives that signal your new narrative or the shift that you're making in a very public way. Pride in Place is arguably a totem at the national level, signalling a shift that the government wants to make. And the way that councils and neighbourhood boards use the funds that they control, what gets funded, how that's decided, and how that is ultimately celebrated and communicated to people as well, will be seen as a totem at the local level, a signal of the council's intentions. Now, if we can invest in the stuff that matters to people, then that's a great start. I saw a recent report from this last week or so showing that from the Independent Commission on Neighbourhoods, showing that communities with fewer public spaces are more likely to experience civil disturbance. So revitalising public spaces, especially those that have been historically neglected or lost, is going to be a huge part of developing that pride. But my provocation goes a little bit further than that and gets to the heart of what that Pride in Place programme is all about. Pride is about ownership, not just proximity. It won't be enough just to bestow these investments onto communities as subjects or serve them up on a platter to people as customers. We need to involve people in the process of deciding what gets funded, beyond just community representation on a board. So that whole communities can feel ownership over decisions that are made. And our colleagues here today, as I say, are going to be able to share some really valuable experiences on that and what a kind of totem can look like from a digital engagement perspective. But we also need to create ways for people to play an active role, not just in the decision, but actually in how those initiatives are delivered, so that they can feel agency over how things are done as well. And we need to look at where that's already happening. What initiatives and what citizen activity is already taking place, and how can we encourage and support that through this funding. So my invitation to councils is to think about how the process of deciding what gets funded and the things that get funded themselves can become bold symbols of the shift that you're trying to make. See Pride in place not as a one-off program or funding stream, but as a totem, a symbol of that broader shift, that narrative change that you want to see. So what could that look like? That could be about making a public commitment to a certain percentage of those impact funds going into community-led initiatives. It could be committing, to inviting whole places to meaningfully shape decisions and plans, for example, through a sort of digital engagement process, not just responding to a survey or a consultation on something that might have already been decided. But it also might mean branding what you're doing. You're making it something that's really public and engaging to it in the first place. Think about sort of the Wigan deal or We Are Eastbourne as these kind of powerful brands of the shifts that we're trying to make. Obviously, depending on what funds you've got, that may or may not be something that's entirely in your control. So consider how you can bring your neighbourhood board into that ambition as well, and what other council initiatives could act as symbols for the shift you're trying to make. Finally, I invite you to think about what you can do outside of the big shiny decisions the big things that funding might be supporting, and embed that narrative also in your day-to-day, right across the council and within your neighbourhood boards. So we call this rituals. This is about sweating the small stuff. It's about how you make this way of working part of the business as usual, not just in Pride in Place, in that sort of silo of work, but in everything that the council does. Stepping into that citizen story, as I say, is about sweating the small stuff. And it can be easy to dismiss, but we think it's really important and an area that many organizations can fall down. Lots of councils launch brilliant participatory initiatives or totems, and they have a really clear narrative shift they want to see. But the key to making them stick, we think, is how that narrative shift is built into everything that staff and citizens interact with. So that might mean looking at things like language, from job titles to press releases. How often do you hear the word customer in your day? How you meet, it might include things what happens when you meet, how you interact together as colleagues, how that idea of citizenship is built into what you're doing, and how it's strengthened or weakened through your interactions, but also in where you meet, how citizens are present, meeting spaces, how present the council is in communities as well. And then also finally in how you measure success. The metrics for the Pride in Place Impact Fund are all around outputs, number of buildings, amount of space created, with the hope that adds up to Pride. And those things are really important, as we saw from that report from the Commission on Neighbourhoods, and it will have an impact. They don't necessarily just simply add up to Pride. Pride is a collective endeavour. It's a feeling based on agency and ownership. And so my invitation here is to think about how you can measure not just the stuff that feels deliverable, the outputs, but how you can actually measure the things that matter, the outcomes. Not just the delivery of Pride in Place initiatives, but in the day-to-day, in team and individual KPIs, and at the whole council level. Sorry, I did have a separate slide for that one. So we think this framework hopefully is a helpful way of thinking about how a landmark project like Pride in Place can support a wider narrative shift that you're trying to make as a council for local authorities, and whilst recognizing that it can't do it alone. It's going to take these intentional daily rituals embedded right across organizations to make that news story stick. And it's not an easy time to be doing this within local government, but we think Pride in Place has the potential to act as a totem for that shift that is badly needed. And a great place to start, we'll be hearing from my colleagues at Falkirk and Southwark, who have been practicing some of these ideas in their participatory budgeting and decision-making programs. So I'll happily answer any questions about the framework, about participatory culture shift, or our wider work at New Citizen Project within this session. But if you'd like to connect, then I'll put my details in the chat as well, and very happy to chat with people following the session. So I'll hand back to Laura now, who's going to take us into the next part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that vision setting and for this bit of theory, which has already generated quite a few questions. But before we tackle them, let's give Jonathan and Chantal first the opportunity to present a practical example of how they may have put some of those ideas in action through the Think project. So Jonathan, Chantal, over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura. So yeah, I'm Jonathan from Southwark Council. What I would say is that Southwark, we do a heck of a lot of things in community engagement, and it's growing all the time. The sort of things that we do, and I think over the last few years, that emphasis on the buzzwords like co-production and so on, but I think actually moving from them just being buzzwords to being things that we actually do regularly has been quite marked in recent years. We've all sorts of things. I think ever since we launched the Southwark 2030 agenda in 2023, I think it was, which involved working with hundreds and hundreds of people in the community to develop a series of goals for the council to work towards over the following 7 years, building towards setting the idea of where do you want to be in 2030. So that was very heavily co-produced. But also some of the things that we've set up over the last year or so, just within my department. A massive piece of work around making Southwark an age-friendly borough, which is working with hundreds of older people in the borough to sort of come up with ideas and solutions for the problems that they face day to day. A colleague of mine is setting up a women's network, so actually coordinating the various groups that already work in that space to share budget spaces and priorities and work together with the council to deliver better for women in Southwark. We worked on delivering a Black Elders Centre, so as a space where older people in our Black communities can get together, but obviously contributing both to their sort of health and well-being, and access to health services, social space, and so on. And we're also delivering a youth civic leadership program. So we're actually inviting young people in to actually meet councillors and council officers and shadow some of the things that are going on in the council, so that we're developing civic leaders in the future. So that's the sort of stuff that we are already doing. It's a long way around getting around to when Chantel and her colleague at Clearview got in touch with us. Actually, I didn't know anything about it. They came to us and they said, "Hey, we've got this amazing scheme. Can you help us get it off and running in Southwark?" Um, and we jumped at the chance because it sounded exactly like the kind of thing that really, really fits in with Southwark Council's agenda. So I will hand over to Chantel to actually explain what the Think project is and how that works. I think it's a fantastic project, but let her explain.
Cool. Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. So a little bit about the Think Fund. So we're Clearview Research, and we do a lot of research and engagement. We do a lot of participatory research. We do a lot of co-creation. And 2 years ago, we had a co-creation group of residents from that lived in Southwark and that lived in Lambeth, and they were tasked to kind of reimagine what funding would look like in their community. So they did some community research with their peers, and they more or less came up with this idea of like, people from the area pitch for money to kind of fund some of their projects or some of the ideas that they're doing, but then also residents from the area vote on who receives the money. So kind of removing that barrier of like, maybe there's a panel of people, or there's a group of community leaders who are well known that decide, but actually putting the power back into the residents' hands. So off the back of that, our boss went to a few funders and basically said, "We have this idea. Can we have some money to try and make it happen?" So Impact and Urban Health, Wellcome Trust, Alan and Sadie Babette Foundation, and Indigo Trust all got on board and helped fund, where we had a pot of 400k to more or less bring this idea to life and make this idea happen. We kind of started with a community board, a community panel, where again we didn't want this to be led by Clearview Research. So we did via a process called sortition. We sent out 4,500 letters to just residents across Southwark and Lambeth, inviting them to apply for the community board. Again, it wasn't like, oh, what boards have you been on before, or what, how successful are you in the community space or board space? It's literally just, how do we get residents involved in this, and also not self-selected leaders. So we decided to go that route rather than like the normal social media call out, because there are just, it might be the odd person who lives in the area who's been there for years, but they might not have, the same maybe notoriety or the status of, maybe a community leader or someone who's done a lot of work in the area. So we kind of just wanted to reach residents and invite them to apply. And once they applied, we got out of the 4,500, we got about 100 sign-ups, which shows that, we kind of did a few A and B testing. Would brown letters help? Would white letters help? What would make people actually open these letters that come through their door? What would help build that trust to make people apply and not think that, this is maybe a scam or something a bit dodgy to get people involved. But yeah, we did get a range of people sign up from, all walks of life, from different age ranges from people from different backgrounds, those that have different abilities and so on. And off the back of that, we formed our community board, who have more or less led the whole process of the Think Fund. They even renamed it. So it was originally called Shifting the Power Fund, but as you know, in this space, everything's called Shifting the Power. So they came up with a new idea for a name called the Think Fund, which stands for Tackling Health Equalities using Neighbourhood Collaboration. So they did the rebrand, they did the logo, they did everything. And then they also did their own version of community research in their areas, speaking to their neighbours, speaking to their peers to ask what should be the priorities, what does our community need? And off the back of that, they came to two kind of key focus areas, which was mental health and well-being and access to healthy choices. And these ideas were very broad, but broad on purpose, because, there's people in the area that maybe, running a run club, or, they might be helping in their local food bank, or they might do some young people in the area, but they might not exactly fit into certain categories. And because of that, they may have been declined for funding in the past. They kind of made it as broad as possible. And we also kind of trained up the community board. So they had like EDI training, they had training in like grant making, and they were also kind of empowered to kind of help them make the right decision. But it was all them, from the kind of priority communities that we wanted to kind of target. And again, this is based off the community research that they had carried out, but also based off research that Southwark had already done and based off research that Lambeth had already done. And then, off the back of that, we kind of went live with the applications being open in October. So applications went live in October, and that was just an invite to all. And we kind of did it in like a tier system where there was like small grants, medium grants, and large grants. And that small grant pot was really important because, again, it's for like more informal people who are doing work in the area, but they might not have like a formal charity, or they might not have a registered organization. But if they walk down the street, everyone knows them because, they're the person that checks in on, their neighbor or their local corner shop or however that may look. So we did all of the applications via the Go Vocal platform. So for Peckham, I don't know if I actually mentioned, it was specifically based for Peckham, which is in Southwark, and then for Brixton, which is in Lambeth. So for Peckham, that was all on Southwark's Go Vocal platform, and then for Lambeth, that was for Brixton, that was all in Lambeth's Go Vocal platform. And it was really important for us to kind of collaborate with Southwark and Lambeth Council, just to help us with that kind of credibility and the importance of like, we're not just like these random people that are coming with this idea. We are supported by, the local authority. And we got just under 230 applications in. So a range of applications, and these range from health and well-being ideas around, making health and well-being a bit more accessible. So again, fitness, run clubs, football groups. There was stuff around kind of youth empowerment, and youth clubs had signed up. There was interesting things around like storytelling, and using like documentaries and video to kind of capture health. To capture some key issues that residents face around like health and health inequalities and so on. Off the back of that application process, voting went live in November, and voting literally just closed 30th of November. And that was a journey in itself. Leading everyone back to the Go Vocal platforms, and how do we reach, the local communities, because there's an element of like the actual applicants, of course, have their communities, and there's, the people who are part of their projects and so on that they're getting to vote. But then, of course, some people were a bit like, why is this not just a competition? If this person's more popular, then aren't they going to get more votes? Or, we're not as public on social media, so how do we encourage people to vote for us and so on? So there was a lot of a journey between that. How do we support all of the applicants to kind of get as much votes as possible? We did like flyering, we did like paid ads on digital spends. We created assets for them as well, for them to kind of share on their social media channels and on their email groups and so on. And yeah, just kind of a range of different kind of marketing tactics. Also the actual Go Vocal platforms itself, there are already people on it. So there was a lot of engagements on that, like lots of comments from, people that had kind of already been on the platforms and engaged in other different projects and so on. And yeah, so the voting just closed on the 30th, and our final vote count was 4,679 votes. And that was 3,116 in Brixton, and then 1,563 in Peckham, so on the Southwark platform. So we beat our target. We didn't think we'd get this much vote, so we're super happy with the outcome. And of course, there's a little bit of like verification that we have to do on the back end, just to ensure that like the voters, like the addresses link up, just to make sure that it is people from Peckham that actually voted, and there's not duplicate votes and all of that part of it. So that's the kind of the back end job for me and my colleague Jerry Ann this week. And then yeah, the winners or the grantees will be announced next week. And then there's a bit of due diligence on our end, whether it's through like safeguarding, depending on their projects, CRB checks and so on. And the money will be given to them in January. And then of course there's still like an evaluation process, so we'll still work with some of these projects to kind of make sure that they're supported, make sure that they're able to kind of even things like manage the finance. Some of people that might win, it might be the first time that they've received a certain amount of money, so how do we support them in managing that and things like that. So yeah, by next year you guys will see the actual projects come to life and how that actually looks. But yeah, it was really helpful to have Jonathan even thinking about like how do we make the platform as accessible as possible so that the journey is a bit more straightforward, creating like how to vote videos and different like voice notes and tips for all of our applicants who kind of was like, how do we get people to vote, or how do we know that the vote's submitted, and so yeah, thank you Jonathan for that, and just the platform as well for just helping us with the journey, figuring it out along the way.
Thank you so much.
So it's a bit of a ramble, but yeah.
No, that was amazing. Really, really inspiring. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the next steps of the vote on the platform. In the meantime, let's get Margaret and Stephanie to share their story, and then we can get into some of the questions that people have been asking.
Thanks very much, Laura. Hello everybody, Steph and I are from Falkirk Council in Scotland, and to give you some kind of context around the size of Falkirk, because you might not have heard of it before, we are basically halfway between Edinburgh and Glasgow, and in terms of population, Falkirk has around 160,000 of population, whereas Edinburgh will have just over nearly 600,000 and Glasgow will have over 800,000. So that gives you an idea of the size of the area we're working in. So we run the Community Choices programme, which is now in phase 6, has been running for this is year 6 of it. So it's a participatory budgeting programme, and I'm not going to read all this out to you because I'm sure you're more able to read it than I am. One of the key things, as I said, this is phase 6. So we're really, once we just launched the programme, we asked for applications just recently, and one of the things, once we get past voting and all of the bits and pieces that Chantel talked about, we're actually going to get into a really big review of community choices, basically to kind of support our improvement strategy and underpin the outcomes and outputs detailed in our Falkirk plan. Next slide, Steph, please. The process. It's actually quite straightforward. We invite community groups to submit applications to our grant programme. they are checked for eligibility, and that's what we're doing at the moment. And so that people don't think they're going to be able to be put up for vote, we check eligibility first, so that if they've missed something, or they're not eligible, they're not waiting to think, well, why is my project not on the site or whatever. They're put forward in geographic area in Scotland, called wards, well, they're called wards everywhere, for voting, so that we've got an even spread, and it's open to everybody. Ultimately, we do votes both offline and online, and they're counted and verified, similar to what Chantel was saying around, postcode and a lot of different things, and double voting. The successful groups are notified, and a public press release is issued. Next slide, please, Steph. We encourage participation, and I'm not going to go through all these. You can see what they are, and those pictures are some of the projects that we've funded. We've been very open in the types of things we've funded, as the small grant that we have now is only up to £5,000. So it means that projects can do a lot of different things. They can be small capital projects, or in the main, they're revenue projects or one-off events sometimes. We use our trusted relationships to support voters that are maybe digitally excluded, and that includes using all our library staff, all our community centre staff to help people if they're struggling. And as I say, we have paper votes in all our community venues. Next slide, please, Steph. Measuring success. We've allocated over £3.4 million, and that's served 160 community groups across Falkirk. In phase 5, we had 6,000 votes for 22 and that enabled 22 projects to get funding. We had 57 applications. Those two pictures, you can see that's a kitchen, but it's a kitchen youth project, and that's a training kitchen. So we're part of it, but we've helped support that. And the other, obviously, it's a big project. So really diverse projects. We move on, Steph, please. These are some of the things that people have said about the projects, and what we need to remember is that we have no involvement in what people, as long as a project's eligible and is based in the particular ward they're applying for, we will put it up on the platform. One of the things we're looking at for an improvement strategy is that in the past, for a whole variety of reasons, I'll be honest and say our monitoring hasn't been as good as we would like it to be. What we do know is that we've got evidence of the activity of every project we've ever funded. However, we've not been as good at measuring the impact of what happened, and that's one of our key priorities going forward. For a variety of reasons, a lot of to do with staff shortages, apart from anything else, changes in personnel, lots of different things. One of the big things is that, we will admit that the application process for any grant fund can be a bit daunting, especially for newer, smaller groups. So our community learning and development staff employed at the council, they will help groups to apply. Our team have no role in that at all. We do not involve. We will guide people to our voluntary sector partners who may be able to help them, but we don't advise on, what you should put in or what you shouldn't put in, because that wouldn't be. We don't feel that'd be fair. And I think that one of the things we've learned a lot in the 6 years, and one of the things is about newer or smaller groups. And part of the review will definitely be concentrated on how we make it fairer for those newer or smaller groups. Because if you're new on the scene, you're not likely to be known by a lot of people, so therefore not a lot of people will vote for you. But that's one of the things that we're looking at the moment. And I will hand over to Steph, who will do a more practical description of what we do.
Perfect, thank you. I'm just going to change my screen to our platform. It'd help if I push the share button. There we are. So this is we use our Go Vocal. Oh, is that went back? That's went back to the wrong one. It's not showing me the screen that I'm sharing. That's not helpful. There we go. So this is our Go Vocal platform. It's called Participate Plus, and we use.
It's not sharing.
Is it not? Right. Okay. Stop sharing. It's not showing the right one. Let me put this up again. Is it showing the right one this time?
It's not showing anything yet.
Second.
Community choices 2025 in the list of all the wards is what.
That's where I want to be.
Okay.
That's where I want to be. So our platform is called Participate Plus, and we use community choices, the platform for community choices every year. We've only had the platform for about 2 years now, but it has been absolutely great in facilitating what we need for community choices. So we really use our folders to break down all our wards. As Margaret says, we split all our categories into our wards and name them. So it's really, really easy for community groups to see where they need to go. This is what it kind of looks like for us. They're all archived at the moment because we've not set them up for the phase 6. But we put a lot of information in here so that people know exactly what it is they need to do. We give our communities residents 3 votes. They don't need to use them all, but they can't vote for the same project twice. So we break them all down here. Kind of the same as what Chantel was saying. Only those in those specific areas can vote for projects in that area. So only those in Ward 7 can vote for projects in Ward 7. We need to do our kind of checks and things like that as well, which can be quite daunting when you have to go through all the votes. We received just over 6,000 votes from our projects last year, so we only take 10% of our sample size to check that the postcodes all match up in the right areas. When we go into each ward, we can see we make it really simple. We have got a nice graphic here that shows people how to vote. One of the things that we wanted to make it very clear is make sure people knew that they'd submitted their votes, because there was a lot of times where people would click vote but not submit. So we wanted to make that very, very clear. And the way we presented our successful projects was on a completely different page. Again, the platform made this really, really easy because we could use the content builder to change how it looked and really set out which projects had won in each area, and we could say, the amount and what the project was. Good thing about community choices is we get such a range of different projects that there is loads of different ones in different areas, and people really get to select the ones that they feel would be most beneficial in their area. We've got cancer patient care services, we've got sports, community cafes, a little bit of everything kind of across the Falkirk area. Again, this year we are just going to kick off our phase 6 community choices, which will launch, the voting will launch in the beginning of February. And again, platform makes this very easy because we can copy all the projects, so we don't need to set this up every single year, which makes it really good. So that's kind of how we do it. A kind of quick tour of how we set it up. But community choices is really kind of quite well known in Falkirk now. So our kind of communities are aware of it, and they're very good at helping each other and make sure the vote. Our communities are very active when it comes to voting as well. We have community groups go out with paper ballots around doors, in and out, pubs and clubs and things like that, trying to get votes. So they are very, very active when it comes to community choices, and I think that's down to just how successful it's kind of been so far. But we do obviously recognise that we do need to make some changes to make it that little bit fairer for the smaller fish in the big pond, as we say over in Falkirk. So yeah, that's us. I'll hand back over to Laura.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you all for your presentations. It's been amazing to have a little bit of sort of vision setting at the beginning with you, Andy, and then see how some of those principles of empowering citizens have been put in place in places like Southwark and Falkirk. We are 45 minutes in, so let's just maybe give a little bit of time to answer a couple of questions, and then we can wrap up and let everyone go and get some lunch. Right, we've got one in the chat, which is about timelines. And I thought maybe Andy, you would want to have a go at that, and I have some thoughts as well. But if you wanted to go first, it's all about how do we do it in the time frame. So this is about the Pride in Place campaign, of course. How do we do it in the time frames given it all needs to be spent, the budgets need to be spent by 2027?
Yeah. Sorry.
So yes, I don't know if there are any thoughts that you wanted to share about that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's obviously it's quite a big question. Very happy to catch up with Thomas at some point as well and discuss it a bit more. But one thought, I guess, was it's with what I was talking about earlier, this kind of cultural shift, that is a very long-term view. Like it's not something that you can just go, okay, we're gonna launch a totem, we're gonna just define our narrative shift, and then we're gonna do some rituals or we're gonna change a few things internally, and that's gonna create this whole shift. I think for us, it's really important to see that as a long-term investment, and therefore seeing it's sort of all the more reason to see the Pride in Place, impact fund specifically as a sort of one part of that, like a very, a really good opportunity because it's providing some funding that can act as that sort of totem, that one-off project, or the few projects that might be delivered, but seeing that as a contributor to a bigger, broader shift that's going to hopefully continue long after the impact fund. And so I think that's probably the more sort of like higher level how to sort of see that in terms of the practicalities, and others may have thoughts on this as well in terms of experience from doing this from within the council. But I think not seeing the perfect as the enemy of good in this sense. Like there are ways to do that engagement that are a little bit lighter touch, lower fi, not launching a whole massive platform potentially, but doing a small bits of engagement around that impact fund can be a good way to start. But importantly, framing that as a one step in that right direction of that sort of broader shift. At the same time, our experience of doing some of the deliberative processes with a digital engagement platform as part of that has also been something we've been able to do quite quickly and get set up. So yeah, it's something maybe to kind of experiment with and explore. But yeah, seeing that impact funding as part of a wider shift is probably a good way of getting started with that.
Yeah, perfect. And I don't know if Sadek, Falkirk, any of you have any thoughts on how maybe the digital engagement piece can help you facilitate and drive things forward a little bit faster, whether that is in the setup phase or in the analysis phase. I'm just curious to hear whether there's any kind of aspects of the digital solutions that can support those projects, which speed things up a little bit for you. Margaret, I think you've got a raised hand there.
One of the things we're considering, especially with the impact fund, that as colleagues said, it's not a long time till 2027. One of the things that we're looking at is to look at projects that potentially haven't been funded through UK Shared Prosperity Fund, which we had for the last 3 years, and or community choices, because obviously you'll see that in the presentation we said that 22 out of 57 were funded last year. So there are projects that potentially people have wanted but have not been able to be funded. So that may be something that we can use the platform for, and go back and look at what was put up, what hasn't worked, or and are these projects still viable under Pride in Place? Because obviously people did vote for them, but they just didn't get enough votes, some of them.
We've got many hands raised. Jonathan?
I'd like to echo that actually, is that one of the outcomes for me in community engagement from working with the Think Project is that we've now got about 2,000 people registered using our platform that we didn't have before. And we've also got a pool of a couple of hundred proposed community activities, not all of which will receive funding, but actually next time that we have a pot of money or we have some kind of grants program, we know who we can write to and invite them to participate in. So this isn't, Chantel and team will be helping to decide on the ones that get awarded on this occasion, but it's not the end of the story for those people. I think that's really important.
And Stephanie, I think you've got a hand up as well.
Yeah, I think particularly when using the platform, it makes it really, really easy to kind of pull together the ideas and the responses from what people have said, and you can really pull these from one phase to the other so that you can kind of make a whole project so everybody can see it. I know particularly from Falkirk Council's side, we are trying to use a kind of ideation function to really look at what the communities are saying, rather than us just making the assumption that we know what people want. That is a lot easier said than done. As a council, we're quite risk averse to going out and just asking for opinions. But it is something that us as a team are really trying to push, because we think in the long term, like Andy's saying, you need to think about the whole kind of project. It could be really beneficial to show that really good part of engagement that can then hopefully kind of shine through for the full project. So that's the hope in Falkirk anyway.
Yeah, to summarize what you've all been saying, it sounds like it enables you to build more sustainable processes that can last and that can be replicated later on, and thereby potentially changing that attitude that Andy was talking about, which is great, and we'd love to see that. Very quickly before we wrap up, I think this is a question that would be more for Andy, but I don't know, maybe Falkirk has some thoughts as well, given that you have been awarded some Pride in Place funding too. It is specifically about the neighbourhood boards, which will be, this user is saying, so influential in the long term, but given they need to be established soon, we will have less of a chance to significantly engage community to ensure that the board is representative. There is a risk that we might just be going to who we know, i.e. the loudest voices. Do you have any advice on approaching establishing such a board?
Yeah, definitely. It's a really good question, and I think thinking about that board in the same way that I've been talking about councils as a whole is possibly a good way to start there. The risk with the boards, because that is the only sort of requirement of the funding, in terms of community engagement. Obviously, the ambition is for councils and those boards to do a lot more than that. But the risk is that we see those boards as the only way that people are involved. Like, we see them as just, oh, that board has some community representatives. That means the community has been involved in these decisions. The communities are not going to care whether there was a few representatives on that board, or even if that board was the most representative in terms of diversity and all different types of demographics. People aren't going to care if the decisions that are made have no resonance with their own lives. So that's why I think there's a really, real importance to see that board, not just the council, but the board and the council's role in that board as a facilitator of that wider engagement, and that sort of an enabler of what happens following this funding and what stems from that funding, rather than just the sole decision maker. Because ultimately, that would just be a subcommittee of the council. That'll be how it will be seen. So I think that's probably the starting point to think about. And then maybe Margaret, I don't know if you want to share a few thoughts on sort of some of the practicalities of that as well.
I'll be honest, difficult, but I think one of the things that certainly our team are very much in favour of is that the board, yep, not everyone is going to be on the board and how representative of the community, we recognise that. However, I think using the platform gives us an opportunity to at least have some kind of voting on the decisions that the board make, or some kind of poll, not necessarily voting, but on how we use our digital connectivity to get to as many people as possible. I don't think it's a bad thing if people vote against something, but it still goes ahead if you've got justifiable reasons for that. Build a new school. You can't build a new school and you're not going to get a new school by 2027. So you need to look at it. People will come up with ideas that are unachievable within their time frame. However, I think it's important that they have the opportunity to voice their opinions on it, and be involved in that whole process. I don't know what the nuts and bolts of that are going to look like, but it's in our thinking at the moment. Whether we'll be listened to is a different thing.
Thank
I
you.
think absolutely. I think that breadth and depth of participation is going to be really important. Like doing the broad stuff, digital engagement that can involve really large groups of people, and then some of the really deep stuff, like Chantal mentioned, around the sort of community direct conversations with communities. Just thinking about the boards, the other thing I thought of was the governance of that is going to be part of that. Like the founding structures within those boards are going to dictate how those boards act for the next 10 years. So getting that right from the start. And again, that's something I understand that the boards haven't themselves the opportunity to shape. So understanding, what decisions can we make, and what decisions need to go to communities, and what are the ways of doing that. So yeah, seeing that as a really important part. Sorry, Chantal.
Yeah, no, literally more or less I'm about to say the same thing in terms of like, also as like a resident becoming a board member, or however the board looks, you don't want them to feel that pressure of, oh no, because I come from this Afro-Caribbean community, I now represent all of people with Caribbean heritages, or I may have this disability, so now I represent all of these people. And you don't want them to feel that pressure, which is why we kind of went that extra level with that community research, and kind of allowing them to now go into their community and speak to people. And we kind of even allowed them to shape how that research looks. So we said, do you guys want to do interviews? Do you want to do a survey? Or should we do focus groups? Or, even things like using WhatsApp and polls and Nextdoor, and like giving them that kind of opportunity, because they know their community better than us. So kind of giving them that freedom to kind of shape it, and for them to feel less of that kind of pressure or burden. Of course, joining the board, there is a level of responsibility and accountability that, they will hold. And we do say to them that you guys are ambassadors of this to a degree as well. But of course, it's not all on you to decide everything. So yeah, following that.
Amazing. Thank you all so much. We should probably wrap up. But I can see most of our attendees stuck with us until the very end, which means that we shared something interesting. So thank you so much for all of you to participate, and thank you to those who attended. Again, we will be sharing the recording, and I see that everyone shared their email addresses in the chat, so I'll be adding those in the follow-up email as well if you wanted to reach out to our partners at Falkirk, Southwark, or New Citizen Project. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
Bye.